Awesome, right? So I'm going to make a start. I see people flying in as we speak, but want to make sure we keep as much time as possible for questions moving forward. So in terms of what we're going to think about today, in the next 45 minutes, I have three quick categories of things to talk about. The first one about me, that shouldn't take very long. Just want to introduce myself, make sure you understand my background and what I've done in the past. Then we're going to move into the Ask Me Anything question. I'm thinking that's going to be 35 minutes of the session. And then quickly at the end, I would be remiss if I didn't share opportunities how I can support you with your recruiting journey moving forward. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce myself. I'm Will. I'm from the UK, although I'm based in New York City right now. My background's in teaching. After I graduated university, I taught high school chemistry in a boarding school in West London for 5 years, which was a great job. But I realized I loved the part of teaching that was leading small teams through challenging problems, which is sort of consulting in a nutshell. But I realized to get there, I needed to go to business school to get skilled up, get those business skills that we need to do the recruiting process and to do the job. And so I went to the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth, where I recruited for consulting in the US and the UK. Ultimately, I was a summer associate at Bain in London, but also did some recruiting in the US as well, like I mentioned. And then in my second year, I helped run the consulting club at Tuck, which is one of our largest clubs that helps 170 candidates recruit for consulting. So I've sort of seen both sides of the aisle. I've been on the school side where I've been helping running the mentor program and helping candidates prepare that way, and also been on the other side of the hedge, sort of internally helping with the Bain recruiting stuff. So I can speak to both of those different perspectives today, should that be a helpful topic of conversation to touch on. Right now, as I mentioned, I'm in New York. I have a few months until my start date in 2025. So in the meantime, I'm using this time to help candidates like yourselves land their dream offer. I have a few more different stats down the left. My favorite case, I threw that in. 2 cases actually, which is cheating a little bit of a favorite, but I love California parking lot from Columbia 17. I like that one because it's got a really balanced flow. It has great examples of all the different things, great framework, great maths, great exhibit, great brainstorm, great recommendation. And then I love the Coyotes case in Fuqua 14 as well. That's a bit more of a pressure case, but I like seeing the sort of creativity that comes out in that one. Awesome. So great to meet everyone. Moving across to the AMA section. I think we haven't got that many people in the chat, in the meeting so far, but I think there's going to be more coming through soon. So the way I want to manage the sort of barrage of questions that's going to come through is just quickly message your name into the chat to sort of create a queue of people. And then when it's your turn to ask your question, I'd ask that you turn your camera on, introduce yourself briefly in terms of name, the school you attend, and city choice, and then share your question. I threw a couple of questions just to inspire you. No need to ask these ones or anything related to these, but I just wanted to give some inspiration. Also wanted to recognize there may be people who aren't at MBA programs on this sort of class or call or whatever you want to call it, and that's totally fine. Sort of the questions we might be sort of receiving today are more geared towards MBA candidates, but at the same time, like there's no reason why you can't listen in and ask questions of your own. And I'm sure, like broadly speaking, it's roughly applicable across the board. Anyway, with that, I'll jump to the chat. Who's up first? We have Talha. Apologies if I messed up that pronunciation.
You're all good. Thank you, Will. I really appreciate that. So my name is Talha. I'm a senior at Sewanee University of the South. It's a liberal arts college in Tennessee. I'm an international student here, but have no visa sponsorship for UK. I have family over there. So kind of recruiting on both sides of it in the US and in the UK right now. So I'm undergrad, so obviously a little different from what the target audience is, but just really wanted to get to know how to start prepping for the case studies. I have investment banking experience at a bulge bracket before, but really trying to be on the strategic side of finance. However, I haven't started the case studies. Seems like US for associate consultant, a lot of like the deadlines have already passed, but for the UK, they're still like recruiting and on the grind. So we'd love to know like how to approach the case study for someone who have like almost zero experience in case studies and stuff, and what would be the resources other than the the business schools, PowerPoints, and like the case in point. So really trying to get to know like how to get started on the case interviews, and like also being from a non-Dartmouth or a non-Ivy school, it's a bit hard to get past the screening from HR. In investment banking, it works mostly like networking and like cold emailing, but seems like consulting has a little bit different approach here. So would love to know like your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So I'll talk about how to start casing first. My first big piece of advice is to go ahead and start. A lot of people they're like, oh, I haven't worked out the approach or how I'm going to do it, and they sort of take 2-3 weeks before they get casing, and that can really like kill your prep time. So it's better to just bias towards action and start preparing sooner rather than later. Sounds like you're pretty well engaged though, so you're in a good place. In terms of how to start, one of my favorite resources, and I don't get any commission or anything from this, but I really like Rocket Blocks. I think it's a great way to practice all the different parts of a case without having to do the whole thing in one go. A lot of people do an hour-long case or 40-minute long case and waste like 25 minutes on things they already are good at, and when they could be focusing on those things they need to build skills in. So Rocket Blocks, is a great place. I also like Case Coach. Again, no commission from them at all, but I think it's a great place to start. That's more of a whole case approach, but I think that's also a great place to practice. I think finding someone to practice with who can hold you accountable is really, really, really important. So that can be like really unofficial, like a case buddy who you're just friends with. That can be through a consulting club at your school, or that could be through approaching one of the many amazing coaches on Leland who can help do at least some of your prep with you to help you stop forming the bad habits early on and get you into a really good place. In terms of the international aspect, sounds like you've done a bit of investment banking, and some parts are different, some parts are quite similar. Things that are similar is that networking is equally as important in banking and in consulting as it is in banking, and so I would definitely not under index on the networking side and make sure you're doing that really good work. Hopefully that helped answer your question.
Yeah, gotcha. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Also, I couldn't get the name of the first resource you mentioned before the case coach. What was that?
Rocket Blocks, ROCKET Blocks.
Got it. Thank you very much. Really appreciate
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for your question. Jeffrey, looks like you're next. Sorry, you're on mute. Still on mute.
Okay, now I think now, okay.
Yeah.
Hi, so my name is Geoffrey Mianeza. I'm a first year MBA student at UNC at Chapel Hill.
Great to meet you. Well, we spoke earlier, but for everyone else, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'm interested to go, like the offices I'm interested into, like Atlanta, maybe somewhere in North Carolina, but I haven't yet made my mind to the offices. I'm flexible to that, to this at this point. And actually, my question maybe it's almost similar to what you just shared here. I just want to understand your perspective when it comes to networking, coffee chats, and like how good should we do it? Like, what's your advice about it?
So the advice for good networking, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. A couple of mistakes that people make. One is I think people like to ask for a lot of time when I think a little bit of time is really useful. So let's say you send out 10 requests. If you ask for half an hour, you might get 5 responses. Whereas if you ask for just like 15 minutes, I feel like your response rate is going to go 8, 9, 10 out of 10, just because the amount of lift that people need for 15, everyone can, regardless of how busy you are, everyone can find 15 minutes. So I think asking for that level is really important. Second big mistake people make is by trying to make loads of different connections as opposed to making a small number of really deep and meaningful connections. So what that means is do a few chats, find someone who you really click with, and then keep that relationship alive and keep them up to date as you progress through through the sort of process. So you might have one call, you might send them an update email, then later on you might even case with them. Then you'll let them know when your application drops. Then you know when you got an interview offer, or you let them know when you did the interview, and you really keep that person alive. And what that does is there's someone behind enemy lines, as it were, who can sort of vouch for you to the recruiting team. So I think, yeah, once you have a small, like a good number of good connections, de-emphasize making many new ones and really focus on building those ones that you have already. Is that helpful? Is that what you were after?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you. Great questions again. Who's next? Is it Fuan?
Yo, sorry.
Hey, no problem.
Hi, Will. My
Hey.
name is Fuan. I'm from Vietnam, and currently I'm doing an undergraduate, an BBA at Italy. My school is at ESP, and last summer I did an exchange at Wharton, in investment banking, corporate finance. My goal was working towards investment banking, but like lately I find myself like inclining towards consulting more. My question is that what advice would you give to your younger self when you were still at school? What would you would do to make your profile stand out more, like when you apply? I know we have a lot of overlaps with initial questions, but like given the standpoint view, when you're still doing BBA, when you're like sophomore or like you're looking for internship, what would make your profile stand out more, given that Bain Company have a lot of applications coming in? Yeah, that's my questions.
Yeah, thanks for your question. I think for me, the firms, banking and consulting both included, what they're looking for are people who are really thoughtful and make decisions for a reason rather than just because it's the obvious thing or it's the next easy thing. So when you're deciding what to do next, whether it's to do consulting or banking or whatever, just think about how does it fit into your story and what are the reasons behind you wanting to do this. When you go into these opportunities, think about like what is it specifically that you want to gain from this opportunity, and being able to craft a narrative. I think for me, I did a lot of like internships that were kind of random, that were really hard to fit into like an overarching narrative of why I made XYZ decision. And so trying to be really thoughtful and be meaningful about what you do and why, I think is really, really important. I don't think there's one magic bullet of like some XYZ activity that is really like important, but across the firms, all the firms are looking for someone who's a leader. So anytime you can demonstrate that leadership capability that you have, be it like leading the C team football squad all the way up to running a massive society, anything like that is really important to emphasize and make it really clear how it fits in with your story and what it taught you about leadership. Is that helpful? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. To clarify on your answer a little bit more, it was a great answer, thank you. But like when you were applying, did you notice that your internships or like what they're looking for at consultants, like the internships that applicants do they need to be a target? Like that you mentioned, like you did random internships and it also work. Like my internships, they also kind of random. I did in high fashion and like in banking, and I also did in consulting. So I don't know if I'm going to focus into consulting more to fit into like what I'm going to do in the future. I'm just gonna explore around and to see what I can do further on.
Yeah, I think for me, it worked in spite of it being a little bit random rather than because the things were a little bit random. But I think regardless of what you do, you want to emphasize the impact that you had in those roles and what leadership positions you had there. So whether it's working in high fashion and you can talk about impacting, I'm not sure, whatever key metric that there is, or whether it's leading a sports team and you had certain success. I think that's the thing you want to emphasize and not worry too much about what specific thing the experience was.
Thank you, Will. Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Next is May, I think. And Catherine, the cases I mentioned were called California Parking Lot in Colombia 2017 and Coyotes in Fuqua 14. Sorry, May, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think you're on mute.
Okay, perfect. No worries at all. Hi, Will. Thanks so much for hosting this today. I am May. I am a current junior, so I'm still an undergrad at Cornell University. This summer, I'm going to be doing sales and trading at a bulge bracket, but I think for full time, I'm looking into maybe more consulting, just because I did like a consulting internship this past summer and realized that was kind of where my interests lie in. So I had a little bit of a question regarding networking. You mentioned this earlier, but you said kind of like focusing on developing deeper, more meaningful connections. And you mentioned like having that first call and then trying to follow up. Do you have any more strategies on kind of like maintaining relationships and sort of getting a hold on consultants who tend to be like busier and like trying to like maintain that relationship with them without feeling like you're intruding?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to this. So like the first part is picking the right person, and then the second part is like what to do after the call. So picking the right person is kind of obvious, but I'll reiterate it. So you really want someone who has a connection to you that disposes them to help you more than the average person. So for you, that might be someone who's in Cornell, someone who's from the same hometown, like whatever it is, doesn't really matter as long as there's like that great connection that you can say in the intro email, like, hey, I see we both came from the same sorority at whatever. Uh, that immediately means they're way more likely to help you and way more likely to want to build that connection. I guess the want is an important part because it's a two-sided thing, right? They should feel like bad networking feels transactional one way, where they're helping you and you're not really doing anything for them. And what the question is, what would they want to get from you? Well, people want to feel like they help other people, and they want to feel like they're mentoring and supporting people, particularly those who came from, or at least have a shared connection from them. So you really want to emphasize there's like two sides to this. You're definitely getting help and advice, but they're also getting that mentorship and that feeling of supporting people, which is really important to lots and lots of people. Usually people want to help rather than don't want to help, but people are busy as well. So that's where the second part comes in. What are the strategies? I think so. The first one I mentioned is not asking for too much. So strategy one I shared already is saying 15 rather than 30 or 20 rather than 30. I think that's pretty obvious. I think a second strategy that I used a lot is starting my networking emails. Hey, I recognize that you're really busy, so no need to reply, but I just wanted to drop a quick update to keep you in the loop. Immediately, the person's like, oh, thank God, it's an email. I can keep up to date, but I don't need to spend like 5, 10, whatever it is, minutes drafting a response or following up on that thing. So yeah, like making it clear that, they're busy and you're really respecting and honoring their time is another helpful strategy that I used a lot.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense with like trying not to appear super like transactional. I think an issue that I kind of run into when trying to develop a relationship is that when I only have 15 or 20 minutes to sort of like build repertoire with somebody, I tend to only be able to ask like very introductory questions like I don't know, what brought you to consulting? What do you like about the London office? Stuff like that. And I feel as though that kind of hinders me from developing a meaningful relationship where that person might want to mentor me more. So do you have any advice on like maybe like questions to ask or way to make the call flow so that you can build that relationship?
Yeah. So first thing is, I don't think, to be clear, I don't think all the calls need to be short. I think you can definitely schedule a longer one if you get to the end of the 15 minutes and you're like, wow, actually that was a really good call, and I think that I could learn a lot from you. Notice how I'm emphasizing like I can learn it from you. They get the mentorship that they're looking for. You mind if we schedule a follow up or a bit more time so I could dive more deeply into XYZ thing? So like you can definitely do a short one and then a longer one later. And all your intros don't have to be short as well. It kind of depends. If you think they're going to be hard to pin down, that's when I might lean a little bit shorter. And this applies to any MBA candidate as well. All of this advice I've shared with you is MBA ready advice too. Trying to think of anything else. Yeah, and so process is super, super important, and consultants love process. So if you say up front, hey, I recognize we don't have a lot of time, so I'd love to do a quick introduction, and then I have loads of great questions that I want to get into. It's how you can like move away from like 4 introductory questions. Oh, hey, what do you like about school? How's it going? Well, like you can get all that important, but maybe priority 2 stuff out of the way, and then you can focus on the good questions that you have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks so much.
Great, awesome, happy to help. Cool. So just calling out anyone else, feel free to throw a question or your name in the chat. Casebook recommendations from Nicholas. There's lots of great casebooks out there. I helped work on the Tuck one. If you can get your hands on that one, that's one that I had a personal stake in. But I think the two ones that I give out to most people, there are two recommendations that I give out to most people are one, for the cases, Kellogg is great. All the cases, really high quality. They've got good, they're like learning focus. So they're not too, one problem with cases is sometimes they're too realistic, which is actually not a good thing. Sometimes you want them to be a little bit sanitized, so they're actually good to learn from. Because sometimes the firms use cases that they put them together reasonably quickly. They haven't been tested through lots and lots of reps. And so they can be a little bit slapdash, if that makes sense. So having cases that are a little bit less real, but more focused on learning is really important. So Kellogg, what year? I'd say 24. I'd say that for any book. Usually the newest one is the best. In terms of like, all the case books have like an intro section. So they'll have like things ranging from like Zoom advice, office profiles, sample frameworks. And the one that I think that has the best upfront section is Booth, like Chicago, followed closely by Columbia. Those two, like Booth particularly, has very comprehensive upfront sections, and you could almost teach yourself how to case. I don't want to give that advice, but you could almost teach yourself how to case using the front of the Booth book, or at least you can certainly get a lot of best practice from it. I like the cases in Columbia a lot as well. Like my favorite case is Columbia, California parking lot, like I said at the beginning. Great case. Any other books that I like? No, I think I'm going to leave it there. Was that helpful? I'm not sure if Nicholas is there, but I think, and there was a question about are they available to download? The answer is kind of. They're if you Google them, you can probably find them on Chegg or Course Hero or something like that. No problem, Nicholas. All good. And they're probably on Chegg, Google, whatever, some Dropbox. But usually the clubs try and keep them sort of within the clubs. But there's definitely a way to get hold of those. Cool. Anyone else got a question there? Was anyone waiting to talk? If not, feel free to unmute. We'll go again, other people. Yeah, May, what's up?
Hi, yeah, so I just had another question. So I know that you were at Tuck at Dartmouth and then recruited into the London office. So I'm actually international as well. So was also looking into like maybe returning back home to somewhere like Japan. So in terms of like recruiting to an office that doesn't have maybe a direct pipeline to your school, what does that look like? How do you get in contact with like the recruiters or the consultants or try to convince them that you're actually interested in their office?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first thing, like this is not in response to your question, but just general. I really strongly advise against playing the game of trying to, I know you're not asking this, but I want to just give the advice of do not play the game of trying to pick an office that is easy to get into. Figure out where it is you want to live, where you're going to be happy and where you can build a life and apply there. The firms have really good BS detectors on this front, and they're really good at figuring out the people who fancy getting into whatever office and then moving. But I know that wasn't your question, May. Your question was about pipelines. So for Tuck, we send roughly one person every year to the UK. I'm the one from the 24 class. So yeah, we don't have a big pipeline, although there's something there. I think in terms of approach, different offices have different levels of networking requirements. I think everyone wants networking and it's important everywhere, but there's a different bar at different places to how much you probably need to network to get them. So what I mean by that is if you're at Tuck and you're applying to Boston, which is 2 hours drive away, you need to have networked very, very well. Whereas firms are realistic that if you're at Tuck and you're recruiting in London, or you're at Brown and you're recruiting in London, or Cornell, you're recruiting in London or whatever, they're realistic to the fact that you may only make 1 or 2 good connections, but still comes back to that point around you need the one champion, the one person who you keep updating and you keep on your side and who goes and taps the recruiting team and says, hey, this person's good. So like that advice doesn't change, but maybe the numbers of the realistic numbers of connections you can make is slightly smaller. Obviously, they're all going to be on Zoom, which is fine. People are totally used to working on Zoom now, obviously, after having remote work for the past, whatever, 5-6 years or 4 or 5 years. So online networking is totally fine, but the same rules apply. Ideally, you'd find someone in that office who has a similar background to you and then approach them. Was that helpful?
Yeah, that was definitely helpful. I just have a follow-up to that. So, I think for my school, most of the recruitment goes into DC and Boston instead of New York, and then a little bit to San Francisco. But having like roots in like Chicago as well as Miami, I'm kind of like also interested in that over somewhere like DC maybe. So in that case, like, do I just kind of try to find someone who has a similar background to me, even if they're not an alumnus of my school, or is that kind of not so feasible if you already have a pipeline to different locations, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so my advice would be to try and ignore the pipeline and focus on where it is you see yourself living, where you will be happy and where you can build a life over the long term. Like that's really important. And then at that office, then find someone who's well connected to you, rather than letting the office, like the people who's available, drive your decision. Because ultimately, you're going to perform better and be happier at an office where at an office where you want to be, as opposed to where everyone else is. So yeah, let yourself be driven by where you want to end up. Yeah, did that help?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much.
Great. I had a few questions in the chat. How to juggle MBA course and recruitment at the same time. Yeah, this one really resonates with me. It's really hard to do well. Obviously, like, first of all, recognize that the recruiting period of the MBA program is a really, really, really busy time. And so everyone is feeling this pressure, and you're definitely not alone in that front. And so if you're feeling the stress, feeling the struggles, make sure to take a break and reach out to other people in the club or that you know for support. Super important. With that said, the advice to juggling is, like, my advice will always be process is so important. Like making sure you're staying staying organized in terms of your calendar, in terms of your deadlines, making sure everything's really squared away. Another important point is to really leverage your study group. Most MBA schools will have some sort of semblance of this, and making sure that you really communicate well with them. Hey, I have a crunch the next 2 days, and then they can hopefully pick up the slack, and then you return the favor when they're feeling the struggles as well. But definitely, like, my number one piece of advice is that you're not alone, and to leverage the people around you for support when you need to. No magic bullet for that one, unfortunately. It is hard, but hopefully those are some helpful things to think about. Who else we got? Can you share and rate how hard the case you got during the interview? Well, so I did a lot of cases. I interviewed. I did how many? 5 cases. No, 5 firms, and I did 2 rounds of interviews at those firms. So I did a lot of interview casing. I'd say it ranged from like a very wildcardy McKinsey case that was kind of tricky to an answer first focused Bain final round case, which was weird and sort of unstructured. That it was tricky because they asked you to give your hypothesis a lot of times through the case, and you had to keep updating the hypothesis, which is sort of the Bain. The thing we're focusing on is like being answer first and hypothesis driven. I had some ones that were like straightforward as well. I had one at Parthenon that was just like a practice case. Went through the business, done. So they're not always super hard, but my advice is to prepare to the fullest and be as prepared as possible. No surprise there, probably. Cool. Nicholas, any recommendations for McKinsey PEI, especially what criteria they rate you on and what they want to hear? And 2, what made Tuck special? He visited last week. He knows 2 profs. Amazing. Hopefully, Nicholas, you enjoyed your time at Tuck. A magical place. McKinsey PEI, they want to understand. For me, my takeaways is the thing they want to understand the most is how you read other people and how you understand how they think. So what I mean by that is, you say, I delivered this piece of feedback to XYZ, and I could see in their eyes that they were a little bit confused. They sort of looked at me a little funny, And I realized that I needed to go deeper and explain my reasonings behind this a little bit more. So like hearing that second level personal, the deeper interpersonal sort of stuff, the emotional intelligence, super important. I don't have any insight in the criteria other than that, but they're trying to really understand you as a person. Anything else I want to add on that? There's a lot of good resources on PEI around. Just make sure you're really nailing the takeaways. So at the end of the story, a lot of people lay out a great story, but they don't say, I learned this, and then the next time I did this differently. That's important. Okay. Number 2, what made Tuck special? Amazing place, like I said. I think for me, it's 2 things. The location, and everyone will say this, the location is great because it's sort of out of the way. I feel like if I was in New York, because I'm an international, lots of people would be seeing their old friends. Whereas in Tuck, for better or for worse, you're trapped in the woods. And so you're sort of stuck with everyone. And that means that you get really good relationship and you get to know everyone on the course, which is great. Second thing that's really important is that there's only, well, this is like 99% true, but there's only an MBA program. There's no BBAs, there's no MIMS, there's no PhD program, nothing like that, which means that all the focus of the professors is all on the MBA programs, which means that some of the resources and some of the sort of programming that might usually go to a PhD program, in fact, goes to the MBA students. So you get some really cool opportunities to talk to professors. Professors are great. I'm sure that the ones you know are amazing. Thanks for sharing that question, Nicholas. Cool. Lucas, how would you describe the differences between MBB in terms of the recruitment process? It's a great question. I think that, to be honest, probably quite similar for a lot of things. I think there's some things that there's some differences that are emphasized. I think for one, so first of all, the big one is the staffing model. So I'm sure everyone's heard about this an infinite number of times and is making everyone a little bit sick. But McKinsey has global staffing, BCG has regional staffing, and Bain has home office model staffing. And that sort of changes the emphasis on who you network with. In Bain, it's really important to go to the specific office that you are recruiting for. Whereas BCG, I could see an argument for speaking to people maybe just in the region, and then McKinsey, I think sort of someone who you're really connected well with and have a good reason of speaking to. I think they're fair game sort of globally. I think that's one good difference. But I think reasonably similar in terms of the things you need to do well. Obviously, when it gets to casing, there's like interviewee versus interviewer-led cases. But I won't get into all that. Those are sort of obvious things. But I think there are more similarities than there are differences. Hopefully that helps. Nicholas, which resources do you recommend for PEI? Send me a message. I have something for you. I have a good thing. So yeah, just send me a chat or something like that. Yeah, of course. Cool. I sort of powered through a lot of questions. We have sort of 5 more minutes for any other questions that you have. Anything, like, feel free to be inspired by the ones on the screen or otherwise. Happy to help answer any questions.
Hello.
Hey, Catherine.
Just a quick introduction. I currently quit from the Bain Bain mentorship program recently, and I'm encouraged by the team to reapply for another full-time position. But I'm currently facing the problem is like after that mentorship ending, it's also not easy for me to maintain the relationship with my previous mentor. And besides that, I also not quite sure whether, the Bain's case is very difficult. As I just failed at the first round interview, and the chart is extremely strange and very, you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
I'm just don't know how to make full prepare for the interview in future. So yeah, I also communicated with these issues with my mentor, but I think maybe I need more kind of recommendation or advice. And besides that, I also want to confirm what's the possible hair count for the Bain in London office each year for full time or something else.
So there's a couple of things in there. I'm not familiar with your specific situation, but I think in terms of the networking, sending the update emails that are like, hey, no need to reply, I recognize you're busy. I think that's important, but keeping them in the loop is super important. You do not want to lose that connection that you already have.
Yeah.
In terms of preparing for cases, I mentioned rocket blocks earlier. I think that's a great way to practice the specific things. It sounds like you're having some problems clearing exhibits, particularly more complicated ones. And there's lots of good practice on there of different like weird charts that you need to clear. So maybe give that a little look. And then your other question right at the end, remind me.
It's about the high count for the London office.
Headcount in London is around 1,000 consulting staff. I don't know how many people they take every year. We had like 12 MBA interns across all schools in London in 2023 summer. But as we know with headcount, things change. I don't have any official numbers, but yeah, I think MBA students, they take roughly, a dozen each year.
What about just the graduate AC position?
I'm not sure. I haven't interacted that much with the AC sort of recruiting. I imagine it's, similar.
Okay, thank you so much.
Cool, of course. Cool. Last few minutes, any other questions? Oh, I see. Is that May again? In terms of keeping them in the loop, sending updates, May, feel free to send me a message after this. I have some resources on templates for networking emails. I think, yeah, of course. Yeah, I think not too long because we're not trying to take up time, being really clear about what the ask is, making it clear when they do and do not need a reply, what you need from them. Yeah. Like keeping them in the loop is when you have a milestone. So like when you drop your application or when you do your first case or whatever it is, you say, hey, by the way, I just did my first case. It went super well. Hope you're doing well. And thanks so much for all the help you've given me so far. All the best. Like that's what I mean when I say like an update. I think we have time for maybe one more question if anyone had one. Last chance. It's like an auction, going once, going twice. Cool. Okay, so a little bit about how I can help you in your journey. As I said, it's still 5 minutes. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to jump in. But if you need more support with recruiting, feel free to book an intro call with me. If you feel really confident, you might even like to use my discount code WillS1Intro, which will give you $50 off your first hour of coaching. I'm happy in that session to help with sort of anything that a consulting club might normally provide. I'm happy to sort of do those services, and like a consulting club is great, lots of availability, but at the same time, I've had sort of, more reps, 100+ case sessions. And so happy to help prepare you. Things like recruiting strategy, divination. That means like, which firm should I apply to? Which offices? Should I do IB and consulting? Short answer is probably not. CV, well, there's some specific circumstances where you can do both, but usually not. CV, cover letter, LinkedIn review, happy to do any of those things, whatever is helpful on that front. Networking strategy and prep, we spoke a lot about networking today, so a lot more of what we've spoken about, but also how to find the right people to speak to, how to manage the circle of death, which we didn't speak about, but I'm sure a lot of people who've been to networking events in person sort of recognize and have sort of low-key fear of how to crack those situations. Then like I'd say my expertise, like I love going through the networking stuff and the cover letter, but really casing is what gets me going. I'm happy to take you through cases from intro to pressure case, from California parking lot to coyotes, any of those, and many more cases. And finally, behavioral interview prep, including PEI. I have some good PEI resources to share. I've helped candidates go all sorts of different firms, so would love to help you if that's something that you think would be helpful and useful. Feel free to send me a message if there's anything I've mentioned today that you think would be useful in your journey. Otherwise, please leave a 5-star review if this was helpful. And with that, I'm happy to sign off. Answer any. I'm going to stay on the line 5 more minutes for anyone else that has a question, maybe wants to ask it offline or slightly after everyone else has left. But in the meantime, thank you for joining. All the best. Good luck with recruiting, and enjoy.
Thanks so much, Will.
Awesome. All the best.
Thank you, Will. I have a short question. Should I text you on LinkedIn or on this Leland platform for the PI resources?
Yeah, I think on Leland is good.
Okay, I just added you, so you know it's me.
Cool. Yeah.
And one question: why did you choose Bain over others?
Good question. I think like a lot of it goes back to the staffing model. And I've definitely drunk the Kool-Aid on this a little bit, but I really value like the coaching and mentoring that comes from being in one place all the time. I see some of my colleagues who are like, I think of one person who's like, office is Denver, staffed in Chicago, going to New York on a regular basis too. And I just think like for me, what I really want to build those connections is to be in one place, and that's Bain. I also like, it's also rated in the UK one of the best places to work, and I definitely felt that over the summer. Like I went and I really felt vindicated by my decision. I thought the culture was amazing, and some really friendly people there.
I see. Many thanks for the answer. Yeah, I see the point. Yeah, I live in New York, by the way, too.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you're enjoying the big city, and thanks for joining.
Thank you, Will. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.